Today is all about color correction. We're going to explore the primaries, curves tool, contrast and pivot adjustment, and how to read the waveform in order to achieve a great starting point in exposure, contrast and color balance. So let's jump into DaVinci Resolve and get started. This is the footage we're going to work with today, okay? And so in this copy, we just have the 4 nodes that we're going to focus on today. So let's start with the first one, which is exposure. And let's go to the waveform, click here to expand it. And these represent our whole image. If you can't see like this, click on the button over here, Y, which represents the luminance, and toggle off colorize, because in this case, we just want to focus on the luminance and the exposure, okay? So the horizontal axis represents our image. If you click on the qualifier over here, you can see how it goes from left to right, okay? And the vertical axis represents our luminance range. And the great general guide is for our shadows to have them 5-10% above 0. For our highlights to stay between 768 and 896, and for the highlights of our skin subject between 512 and 768. Alright, so now we're going to use the curves to adjust the exposure. Over here you can see YRGB. Okay, so let's toggle this off and let's focus on Y, because we want the luminance to just be affected. Our points up here and over here represent the widest white and the darkest dark, okay? And the curves from left to right represent our image. If we focus on this one and we move it to the left, we are going to stretch our image up and increase the exposure, but by focusing mostly on the widest part. And as you can see over here, this part is also affected, but pretty much nothing when it comes to the darkest part and even the shadows, just a tiny bit. If we do the same exact thing, but with this one, we're just going to do the same exact thing, but by focusing mostly on the darkest part. So shadows and of course midtones over here as well, okay? So in this scenario, what we did was to reach a general starting point, as we said, maximum 896. We got the shadows above and our midtones are stretched up here. The skin tones is really high in my opinion, so I would probably stretch it back a bit. Okay, you could do also by placing an extra point, click shift, hold shift and click, so that nothing moves on the curves tool, okay? And you could also do this if you wanted to. Yep. So we could say that this is a great starting point and we can move to the color balance for now. So let's open the waveform again. This time, click on this button over here, go to RGB, click on colorize and toggle on RGB. Alright, so as you can see over here, our reds are really predominant on our image. So if we click on red, we're just going to focus on the red one over here, so none of the others are affected. We could like drag these down a bit and reduce the red one, okay? So the blue one, we could increase it from the bottom, so let's click on blue and up. We're going to open the vectorscope. Let's go to all, and we could move the gamma in this case, just have a look, towards a bit of magenta, not too much, blue magenta like this. And let's see before and after we have taken off that extra green that was very dominant in my opinion. Alright, so now it's time for the contrast and saturation. So let's open the waveform again. And we could use the contrast one over here. If you stretch it, what happens is that it stretches the highlights and the dark parts over here. Okay, just have a look at the image. Alright, that's too much in my opinion, but it was just to show to you what I'm talking about. The pivot, if you move it up, it focuses mostly, the contrast works mostly from the darkest area. If you move it down like this, it's going to work mostly on the midtones and the highlights, okay? Alright, so when it comes to the skin, let's open the vector scope. This line represents where the skin is supposed to stand, okay? Where skin color is supposed to stand, okay? If we have a close look, in my opinion, that's alright. What I would do probably later on is to reduce a bit of the red over here, but perhaps it will happen on a window, just because I would like to isolate this part. But for now, I think it's a great starting point. Alright, so let's have a look at the before and after, okay? So the exposure, we reached a great starting point. The color balance, it's quite neutral in my opinion, it's okay. The contrast and the saturation, I haven't increased any saturation here because I think it's still a great starting point. And there was no need to fix the skin yet. So I think it's an amazing starting point, yeah. Alright, so now let's jump on to our second footage over here. We're going to do the same exact thing, but we're going to use mostly the primaries over here, okay? Alright, so let's focus on the exposure first, okay? Let's open the waveform, click on the button over here, off colorize, and let's leave the white on, which is our luminance, because we just want to focus on the luminance for this node, okay? So when it comes to the primaries, we got the lift, which increases the exposure from the bottom, focusing on the shadows. So if we raise this, as you can see, it pushes up from the bottom. The gamma focuses on the midtones, so it's like a push up above from the middle mostly, okay? And the gain focuses on the highlights, like this. The offset focuses on the whole image. So if I'm going to push this up, everything is going up. All right, okay. So as we can see over here, we got at A96 more or less the widest part, which is this one over here, okay. The skin is around 640, perhaps the leg, it's really up here, which is fine in my opinion right now, so it's okay. And the darkest part is above 0, which right now it's a great starting point. So now it's time to color balance our image. Let's open the waveform, click on this button over here, RGB, colorize, and RGB on. The first thing that we can notice is how dominant the red part is over here. So let's click on red and let's push this down. Like this. There's a lot of green right now, and that's okay. So let's go to the vector scope, and now let's focus on the midtones and the low part, which is our shadows and dark area. So when it comes to the midtone, we can see that it's definitely not balanced. In order to do so, let's go to the gamma and let's push the colors in a way that is going to be more balanced. I think it's much better like this. Alright, so now let's focus on the shadows. Like this. There was a lot of red, and we just took out that red. Let's see. Yeah, as you can see, there was lots of red around. And now I think it's much more balanced. So now let's focus on the contrast and saturation. Another technique is to go to our curves, leave on only the Y because we want to focus on the luminance. Click on the three dots and toggle on editable splines, okay? So now if we click on our points, we can see there's a spline over here that you can stretch it up and it's going to create a smooth curve. And you can do the same with these points over here. You can stretch it down and create a very smooth curve like this, okay? Let's see, yeah. It's an amazing starting point in my opinion. And when it comes to the saturation, you can just increase it from the primaries over here, or you could go to the HDR and just increase it on the dark shadows, light, or just a whole image. So you can focus what parts you want to be saturated. I think it's just fine the way it is. Yep. All right, so now it's time to focus on the skin of our subject. Let's open the vector scope over here. Again, this line is where you want the skin color to rest. If we just zoom in a bit, just in my opinion, just by looking at it, perhaps it's more toward red, just even a tiny bit, but to be fair, it's already a great starting point. So I wouldn't touch anything. Alright, so let's have a look at the before and after. Let's toggle this off. Let's open the waveform. So what we did was to increase exposure to a great starting point. And then the color balance, because it was too warm. Contrast and saturation to create more separation and contrast around. And pretty much nothing on the skin because I think it's right the way it is. Alright, so that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching and feel free to like and subscribe for more tips and tutorials. See ya.